Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the Saw Shop. Today's video, let's start the port work on our big nasty 394. I'm going to tell you guys the numbers I'm going with approximately. We'll see where they land and the work that I'm proposing to do, and then we're going to lay out the port work and I'll start grinding it. Now, I only have an hour or two tonight, so we'll see how far we get and we'll make a video with what we got. The main thing is laying out your port work in a way that you can grind and hit your timing without, going too far. Going too far is a bad deal. So if you're new at this, I'm going to show you guys some tips and tricks of what I do when I'm grinding to port a saw.
She cuts, eh?
Everybody that's reached out to me and said you love the intro, thank you. It was fun making it, and I'm probably gonna throw together another intro, and we'll have several that we use. The beginning of the intro is my stock 394 cutting elm trees, and elm's really hard here, and you guys can see the video with a good sharp chain. A 394 just eats. So I'm hoping that this one's going to be that times, quite a bit more. So, first thing we're going to do before I lay out my timing numbers, I'm going to talk about where we were stock with machine work. Now, if you guys remember, I did lower the cylinder slightly. I cut the combustion chamber just a little bit, just enough to make me feel like I'm doing something. And I did drop the cylinder quite a bit. So again, because I write notes, I don't have to remember anything. Our squish is 25.5 thousandths. Add 2 to that, it'll be about 27.5 thousandths with our silicone under there. So that's the first thing I do. Check my squish and set it. If I'm not using a base gasket, I take the base gasket out, measure my squish, and then continue from there. If it's tight, then maybe I want to think about making a custom gasket. If it's loose, meaning, more than 25 thousandths on a work saw, then I might put it in my lathe and cut the base. That's the first thing I do. Second thing I do after I do the machine work is, of course, I time it, because when you lower the cylinder, you change the timing numbers. Okay? Third thing I do is think about how the saw runs stock and what I want it to do. Well, I've put a lot of hours and a lot of miles over the last, 5, 6 years, 7 years that I've had my 394. And I really like it. It's got good chain speed, lots of grunt, and it's a really nasty saw. It's not as grunty as, say, a 2100, but it's faster than a 2100 with a sharp chain. So I really like that about the saw. Anyhow, let's talk about the stock timing numbers again. Exhaust opens 105 degrees after top dead center. Transfers open 126 after top dead center. So I have 21 degrees of blowdown stock, okay? Remember, blowdown is the distance from when your exhaust opens to when your transfers open. Now, that's important. Again, subject of conjecture and arguing, but in my opinion, I want the combustion chamber at the lowest possible pressure when my transfers open. So I'm of the thought process that I want my transfers to open later, as late as possible. 25 degrees of blowdown is kind of a good place. I want to get as much of that exhaust out as possible and go from there. Now, with a good pipe, you could really help that. And so 21 degrees of blowdown, not the greatest, not the worst. We can work with that. Intake timing is 75 degrees before top dead center. If you times that by 2, you get 150 degrees of duration. So that's what we're working with stock. 105, 126, 75. Okay? So I thought about my ported numbers, and I want to make this thing fairly speedy. Again, there's not going to be a lot of scenarios where I need to pull a 4-foot bar buried in a stump. And if I do, I think this saw will still pull it quite nicely. And if not, I mean, friends, I have 298s. One of you donated me a 2101. Thank you. I got a big Johnson right in the back. Friends, I got a P61. I have a plethora of 100cc saws that will pull a long bar. So, the problem is for me with those big saws is I don't need the displacement usually in 2 to 3 foot wood often, or even 2 foot wood. They're not really faster than a ported 70cc plus saw. Rarely are they, and they're heavier. So to me, if I can make this thing really fast, really strong, I think it'll be a really useful saw for me, and I will pull it out more often than not. So we'll see. Okay, so timing numbers. I'm going to want my exhaust at 98 after top dead center. That's where I'm going to run this saw. Transfers, I'm thinking like 123. So I'm going to actually raise the transfers in this build 3 degrees. And again, I think that'll give me enough blowdown to clear the combustion chamber, but because these transfers are so small in this saw, and I'll show you guys when I do one side and then the other, because these transfers are so small, I'd like to open up the upper transfers a bit and get them to breathe more. I want to widen them some and change the direction they open at and also raise them, okay? So 98, 123, so again, about 25 degrees of blowdown is what I'm going to go with here. The nice thing about that is if I decide I want less blowdown, I can raise the transfers a little bit. My intake, I'm going to go with 158. Again, we can push it further than that, but I know from experience 158 is a good number. It'll still idle, but it'll really go in the wood. People have asked me how intake timing affects the saw. Well, if you're shallow on your intake timing, often you'll have a really snappy saw. It'll be really, it'll be really alive and alert. But when you're in a big cut, sometimes it'll gasp for air. It'll feel like it, doesn't want to pull as hard. The opposite end of that, if you have an over intake saw, it's not going to idle often. It's going to be hard to start. But when you're on the trigger, it's going to really cut. So, for a bucking saw like this, and that's what I'm looking for, I may want to push the limits of over intaking, but I don't want a lazy saw. So, where a lighter, say I went 152, I know this saw is going to start easily, it's going to idle well, it's going to tune well. It may not pull as hard in the cut. So, that's been my experience with intake timing. You don't want an intake that's too big, and you don't want an intake that's open for too long. The longer your intake's open, the less vacuum you're pulling on the case. That affects everything like impulse. That affects your total suction when your piston opens. If you're only pulling on it for a couple degrees, when you open, you're not making as much vacuum on the carburetor. And if you're open too long and you overfill the bottom end, well, guess what? When that piston's coming down, right before it closes, you might start to spit back. So, again, these are all things to take into consideration. Okay, I've flapped enough. Let's re-zero the cylinder and make sure it's good to go. I don't think my timing wheel's been touched. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, all you need to mark your timing is you can use a scratch awl or something sharp. This really fine marker is going to be the trick for me today. Okay, a ring, your piston, and your timing wheel and your timing stop and all that. But you can actually use the ring to set your piston height, and then you know where to grind to. Okay, so we're going to focus on timing. The other thing that I'm going to do in the next video probably is I want to lighten this piston. I'm going to put it on our gram scale and set it up and see how heavy is this piston. I want to open the windows up substantially on this thing. Maybe potentially running the ragged edge of sanity, and I really want to push the limits of what I can do with this saw. So anyhow, I'll bring you guys in close. I'll re-zero the timing wheel. I did that on the last couple of videos. You guys don't need to see that. I'll show you how to quickly, especially on your exhaust roof, friends, you don't want to go too high on your exhaust roof. In fact, on this one, I'm probably going to set it up for 99 degrees and grind to that line. Once I chamfer it, that chamfer does open the exhaust a little bit. Once I chamfer it, I'll probably be at 98 if I set it to 99. Off camera, I re-zeroed my timing wheel. Now what I've done here is I took a random ring, that's the same bore diameter of course, and I inserted it into the cylinder. Now what I'll do, okay, piston's at bottom dead center. I'm going to slide this down, put my hand over here. This is how I mark my exhaust so that I don't go too far. I turn the wheel backwards till I hit the number I want. In this case, I'm going to go 99. That way I don't go too far. Now, take it off. And if you guys look inside there, that's how high I have to raise the exhaust port in this case. So that's quite a ways, but we can do it, can't we? We have the technology. Okay, now I'll take this really fine marker and I'll go in there and I'll make myself a good line that I'm going to be able to see. Okay, that's how I mark the exhaust. Now I'll do the same thing with the transfers. I haven't checked this with a ring yet, okay? I always check my transfers with a ring because sometimes you get the wrong... What you see with your eye is not actually where the ring's opening, so, or where the transfer's opening. So, I'm going to go to like 122 and see what we got going on here, okay? Or 124 rather, okay? Let's have a look-see. Well, it looks like the leading edge of the transfers are already opening there. So my rough guesstimate, what I was seeing was 126. So what I'm going to do here is I'm still going to put it at 122 because I know I still want them approximately there. Okay, because I want to make the transfers a little bit higher than they are. So that'll give us 24 degrees of blowdown. Okay, so same thing. I'm going to use this marker because it's marking a little bit better, and I'm going to mark the transfers. This way I'm sure that they're both going to open at the same time. Now on the intake, I don't use a ring, but I can kind of guesstimate just by the thickness of the ring how far I need to grind. And I'll make myself a little reference mark on the intake side for grinding. It's about an hour later, 45 minutes. I have my 90 million candle power DeWalt light. I put it on top of the spark plug hole. You guys can see that the exhaust is open right now. Okay. Bottom dead center, top dead center. Now this is how I do it. I check. I ground right to that line, shaped it, and now I'm going to check. I think I'm going to be at about 100 is where I'm guessing. And I'm just looking here, and I'm right at about 100. I'm going to turn one more light off so that you guys can see that. You can never have too much light when you're porting. Okay, you guys can see the exhaust ports open, 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 closed. And we are at, I'll show you guys, 100 after top dead center. So what I'm going to do now is I'll finish my shaping and then I'll grab my sanding drum and start sanding and smoothing the exhaust port, and that'll give me my extra degree or two. I only want one more degree, and that's, 15 thousandths on this saw, whatever it is. So I don't want to overgrind it. So I'm close enough now that I'll do my finish work. Now I'm going to check the intake. Okay, here's the intake port. We're going up. Again, just like I showed you guys last time. Check where it's opening. It's opening there. And that is 77 degrees. If you times that by 2, I'd end up with 154 duration. Well, I want 158. So what I did is I took a marker and marked the line. That distance there is how much more I need to grind, just for a visual reference. Okay, So I'm going to finish this up, and next time we'll do the transfers. I'll show you guys what I did after I get it cleaned up. Checking back in with you guys again. Okay, I got my light in the exhaust port. My battery's dying. Okay, so again, look for that first ray of light. Right about there. Let's look at where it opens on the wheel. And the wheel is showing us precisely 98 degrees after top dead center. So I got it pretty easy. Big cylinder, really easy to grind. And I put my chamfer in there and did most of my finish work. I'll show you guys that in a minute. Let's have a look at the intake side. Getting you guys up close and personal. There you go. Here's the intake side of the equation. Piston is moving up. Those are the machine marks we talk about, if you can tell if a piston's worn or not. Those little machine marks hold oil. Okay, let's see. Where does this thing open now? Right about there. And let's see where the wheel's at. And as you guys can see, 79 degrees. 79 plus times 2, not plus 2, but times 2, is 158 degrees duration. Okay, I'm going to take the cylinder off and show you guys, and then we'll wrap this one up. Okay, let's take the bolts off. I love porting. I don't know, I just enjoy grinding the metal. I don't know why. It's a sickness. Those of you out there that do it too, you probably feel the same way. I don't know what it is, but something about making them chips fly. Okay, and I'll just move this over so you guys can get a good look at the cylinder. Okay, there's my exhaust port. I widened it some. Okay, I widened it some, and I also raised it 7 degrees. And can you see that little ridge in there? I'll see if I can point in there. Can you see that little ridge in there? Right here? That little ridge is my chamfer. Now, I'm not 100% done the chamfer, but that's where it's at. It really looks horrible on camera. There's a few little pock marks and things, but I polished my squish band. You guys can see that. Now, this cylinder is not mint. There's a few scratches and dings and whatnot. Again, it all looks worse on camera. I've talked to other YouTubers and they say the same thing. Okay. And again, there's some scratches in this cylinder, but I'm not too worried about it. Up and down. That one that you're seeing that kind of swirls around, that's not actually a scratch. It's just the oil in that inside the cylinder. But whatever. It's a used saw, and we'll see what it does. I did the Drake intake. Okay, I cut these 2 little channels here. That should help force it around the crankshaft and more into the transfers. And I just kind of, went in here and this way and that way. I may cut a little more off this side just to kind of even them up, but I'm pretty much done. And again, we lowered the intake. The intake was about, here, stock. And this thing should run good. Now notice I didn't widen this at all. I don't, I went as close as I could to there. I did go out a little bit, so I will have to glue that, but you guys get the idea. Now, transfers. Next time you guys see this thing, because again, I can't do all this tonight. It's getting late. But we're going to go in, and here, I'll show you guys a mock-up piston. More or less. Okay. Same problem as the 288 has. Look how much wider the piston windows are than the actual transfers. Just trying to line this up for you guys. Okay. There's quite a bit of width in here that we can cut these out and cut this out and hog out some of this material in the corner and get this thing rocking and rolling. Okay. So that's what we're going to do in the next video. But again, intake, widened, lowered, shaped. I like to open my intakes in the middle. I don't flatten them. This one I flattened on the sides, but I like my intake kind of shaped like that. That's just the way I do it. Everybody grinds different. You'll never have 2 porters that build the same saw because your hands. This exhaust port is fairly flat. In the video, it looks very flat. It opens in the center and kind of tapers down here, but it is pretty flat. That's what I decided to go with in this one. Okay, so in the next video, we will work on the transfers. Well, that takes care of today's work. Thanks for hanging out in the saw shop. And like I said, next video, we will work on the transfers, start doing piston work, and then I'll start assembling the saw, you know, do my finish work, assemble the saw, and we got to make a pipe for it still. I really want to pipe this saw with probably a bear claw style pipe, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And again, those of you that reached out to me, I've emailed back and forth with a few of you. Thank you for offering parts. There's been a couple of you out there. It's like, hey, I got parts, Tin Man. If you need parts, I can help you out. Thank you to you guys out there. All of you out there that helped the channel with parts or tools, whatever. I can't thank you enough. You guys have been sending me stuff for years, and I really, really appreciate it. It really keeps the channel going. I'm a one-man gang, and there's only so many hours in a day, so again, you guys really, really help the channel out when you do stuff like that, so I can't thank you enough. Anyhow, thanks for watching. Take her easy, and port some saws. It's a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it for years. Later. And I figured since we're here, and well, I look tired today. Friends, I got to work at about 6:30 this morning and just been going steady all day. It's 11:30 at night. I'm just getting ready to shut her down. But I figured I'd throw in a question of the day. Today's question of the day comes from Chris Figueredo. I hope I said that right, Chris. Chris has a whole bunch of different saws, 372s, 660, 359. He says he has no problem starting any of those, but he has a Stihl 044, and he says it tends to yank the cord out of his hand about mid-pull, and he says it gets kind of frustrating and it's hard to start. Is there anything he can do about that? Well, I want to mention something. In my last video I dropped, I was running my Stihl 044, and somebody actually commented that that saw pulls over too easy. It's got to be low in compression, and that's why it doesn't run good. And I kind of chuckled. The reason why it looks like that saw has no compression is because when I pull it over like I mean it. And the reason for that is my 044 tends to yank the cord out of my hand if I don't give it a good tug. And Chris, that is normal for those saws. My 461 was like that too. And the reason for that is those saws, as I understand, have pretty aggressive timing on the ignition, and I think they're pretty advanced out of the box. So if you don't pull them over hard, they tend to fire and yank the cord out of your hand. So Chris, the only way around that is to pull that thing over like you mean it, and then you'll have no problems. But that's totally normal for those saws. Anyhow, friends, keep sending those questions of the day, and I'll throw them in at the end of the videos. Thanks for watching. Take her easy. Later.